Yes, preparing. Live on Facebook. Hurrah. That was slightly different this morning,
Hurrah.
wasn't it? That
Wow,
was quicker, actually. That was quicker.
Oh, was it quicker? Oh,
it
I
was
can't see
quicker.
it. I can't see it yet on your
It
page.
does have a delay, doesn't it? We'll do a little faff till we get
There
ourselves
it is.
sorted.
There it is.
Got
Hang
it?
on, I'm going to share it onto my page.
Yeah, sure.
And then...
And then because I'll upload it and all the rest of it, and I'll just trim this little bit of us guffling
Yes.
along at the beginning. We like a
Yes.
good guffle, don't we?
We like a little bit of a fluff around, don't we, at the beginning?
Now, maybe, because we had, Jacqueline does lots of, oh, it's giving me the words. It's telling me what I'm saying. That's scary.
Is it?
I wonder
Oh, it's haunted.
The haunted talk with Jacqueline and Claire. Oh, that's bizarre. Perhaps you'll see it. Oh, that's good, because that means that people that are deaf or hard of hearing or hearing impaired would be able to join in.
Yes, but
that's really good.
I can't see it.
Perhaps it's on mine because it's my Zoom.
Oh, yeah, probably.
That's very interesting. Morning, Soph. Morning, Gary.
There's a lot of strange stuff going on at the moment on the internet, isn't there?
I know. And morning, Laura. Yeah, because the other day, Jacqueline had trouble. Jacqueline does a fantastic live stream in the evening where we've been listening to the owl service. So I've just been like blood-eye-wet right out this week. And she reads stories like we're a big bunch of girls. Morning, Tony. And we just love having stories, don't we? And it's
come to bedtime stories, everyone. It's so lovely.
Jacqueline's bedtime stories with delightful shenanigans too.
There are shenanigans.
Morning, Sharon. And yeah, it always shows words. Does it? Ours hasn't. This is the first time mine showed words, Tony. That's interesting.
I still can't see words.
Yeah.
Oh, it's different for everyone.
Yeah.
How mysterious.
But last time, when I was chatting last week, I couldn't see what the comments were because I like to see what the comments were.
Yes, the comments have been very weird.
Yeah, and on Jacqueline's live stream as well, we had trouble with comments. Morning, Michelle. So anyway, we're here. We've got a live stream. And I managed not to have myself blurting out twice because normally you get two of me.
How exciting.
I've cloned myself and there's one of me in my phone.
What do you think about this time of year? Well, what I think, Claire, that's what you can do that. It'd be fabulous. So fabulous.
I do talk to myself quite a lot because I'm here on my own quite a lot.
Oh,
Gary, you'd love it. Morning, Naomi. Naomi, my lovely neighbour, is watching. The best Zoom I've ever had was with Naomi. We were doing a death cafe. And she joined in for the death cafe. This was like right in lockdown when you couldn't even look at your neighbours in the eye because you might get coronavirus.
Yes.
And morning, Emma. And I sat there and she tilted the screen and all of a sudden I could see my cat on her sofa sitting up. And I went, George, and he went, and I called the trucker upstairs and I went, come and look at this. And he was like, oh, I'll come and say hello. So he came and he went, hello, Pam, hello, such and such. And he went, George, and George went, oh yeah. And he just zoomed my own cat, didn't I, Gnomes?
Cat shenanigans are the best shenanigans of all, aren't they? And that's it.
Apparently 2 Claires might be double trouble. I'm not having any of that. Gary, we're going to ping you out and start that.
Double the loveliness.
Yeah. Oh. Anyway, good morning, Jacqueline. How are you?
Good morning to you.
From sunny Dover?
I'm Folkestone. Nearly Dover.
But not. Jacqueline, as you all know, has been here many times before.
Several times.
Everyone loves having Jacqueline on because the conversation just... We don't know what's going to happen, do we?
We don't know. I don't know. I've got no idea.
I'm slightly worried. So today, Jacqueline is going to come and talk to us about agricultural traditions and reconnecting with the land. Because obviously we're coming up for Beltane, aren't we?
Mm.
And it's a time of huge sort of planting and get everything ready and, you know, all that sort of thing. So obviously Jacqueline has got a wealth of knowledge about all sorts of things, so I'm going to let you out the trap and off you go because
Are you going to let me out the trap?
As I have no idea what's going to come next.
Well, nor have I. So I'll just say, everyone, before I begin, I'm a bit discombobulated this morning, so if I get addled I will just return to myself and then continue, because there's a lot to say and my brain, I've got dyspraxia and sometimes my brain gets a bit addled between things connecting. So if I sound like I don't know what I'm talking about, I actually do know what I'm talking about.
Definitely
but some
does.
days it's harder to get it out than other days. So what I thought I'd talk about, the reason that I thought I'd talk about this on this date, because you offered me several dates, and this is a particularly significant date, because this is, to say before I begin, I don't know what I'd call my religion or my spirituality, but I am more or less Christian these days. And I have called myself pagan, and then I didn't call myself anything. And then I didn't call myself anything, but I was a bit Christian. And then I call myself Christian and go to church. But I want to talk about the agricultural festivals attached to the church year, because I think they speak about something a lot older, but not in the sense of like, nasty Christianity has come and stolen all our festivals and rituals, but in the sense that these things are intrinsic to humanity, particularly at this time of year. And that although I'm sure I know the church have done a lot of awful things, so I'm not apologizing for the church or saying they didn't, but these festivals would arise whatever happened.
Yes. Whatever faith you had,
whatever
these would be
faith,
things
that's
that
right.
would be important to the people that worked the land at that time, whether it was 5,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago.
And even going into the Industrial Revolution, a lot of our May Day festivities, for example, come out of the Industrial Revolution. And the reason for that is because people were in towns suddenly. They've kind of lost their land through the enclosures over the previous 150 years. And then they were in towns working in factories because they couldn't really work on the land so easily anymore. And they needed these festivals, these reminders of the land and of greenery and of life living, of this kind of bringing back the countryside, like we still now want to go back to remembering how it used to be when it was all lovely. They were kind of doing that in a way. Yeah. And so a lot of May Day festivities come out of the Industrial Revolution, in fact. So it's as though these things bubble up. They bubble up because it's intrinsic to humanity to want to connect with nature.
Yeah, it's a human need of reconnection, isn't it?
Yeah, whatever the religion.
Yeah.
And often you find with religions, I remember years ago when I first kind of thought about all of this, I went to the British Museum where they were having an exhibition about Egyptian religion. And what became really clear at that, which I'd never thought about before, was that there were a lot of religious rituals that were around appeasing the gods. And these were the Egyptian gods. So a long time before Christianity or any of those ideas. Appeasing the Egyptian gods through feast days and providing great big meals. But it was all the rich people were doing this. It was all a kind of rich religion. And the people of the land were still doing the things that they'd always done, which is celebrating the earth, praying to the crops, wanting the sun to come back, all of those things, the seasons, all of those things. Whereas the rich people who had become so rich that they were somewhat cushioned from the effects of the harvest failing, although obviously then they still would have been subject to it, but they were somewhat cushioned by their money and their riches. Their thing really was that they, somewhere inside people, they know that they're benefiting from other people's poverty and other people's demise. And so a lot of these rituals came out of wanting to do penance so that when they died, they would go to, I can't remember what it's called in Egyptian religion, but there's the idea of the soul.
They'd weigh their soul against the feather, wouldn't they?
Yeah, and so they could weigh their soul against the feather in a good way. They would do all these things while they were alive it was like a repentance, like they talk about in Christianity.
Wow.
But really, it was rich people feeling guilty for living off the backs of other people, which is exactly what's happened in Christianity as well, isn't it? Often it's rich people, whereas the people of the land, the commons, which now have disappeared because of the enclosures, are doing a lot of things, giving money. There's a lot of charity goes on in a lot of these festivals, and it's about giving back to the poor people and the people of the land who've had their farming rights taken away from them. So all these things really come out of the land. A lot of our religious festivals come out of the land being taken from the vast majority of people and put in the hands of a few people. So it doesn't matter what religion it is at all, in a way.
It's the ruling class as opposed to religion, really, isn't it?
Yes, it's sort of capitalism, isn't it? That
yeah. But Maria's here, and Emma's got a question as
hello,
well.
everyone.
Did the Victorians sanitise May Day festivals? Emma would like to know.
Well, the Victorians sanitised everything, didn't they? I mean, throughout all of our history, really, particularly since the Reformation. So was that in the 1500s? I'm very bad at dates. Since the Reformation, pre-Reformation, so medieval times, which would have been like 700 to 1400, 15,
yeah, 1485 was the start of the Tudors.
Oh, you're so good. You can do the dates. And
I'll just
blather on. So before the Reformation, the medieval kind of sense of Christianity would have been, and because it come out of the Anglo-Saxon pagan kind of religions, and of course the pre-Saxon things from this land, they still had like hints of magic and like the real kind of connection to nature and to the spirit in nature, and of spirit being immanent in everything pre-Reformation. But of course, post-Reformation with Protestantism, all that stuff was frowned on. You know, the saints had to be done away with. It was all idolatry. You had to stop it all, really. And I think after that, that's when it all got sanitized, really. And certainly the Victorians absolutely sanitised May Day.
Yeah, the creation of the Church of England washed away or tried to sweep away Catholicism, didn't it? When Henry VIII wanted to marry Anne Boleyn and created the Church of England, and that's when the Reformation was, which is, I want to say, mid 15 somethings. Laura's saying bread and circuses. I don't know if she means bread and circuses.
Bread and circuses is a thing. I can't remember what it is though.
Oh, okay.
She could tell us what that is.
Laura,
I have heard of that phrase.
Bread and circuses, okay.
The Reformation happened several times, of course, because when different kings and queens came in, they were either Catholic or Protestant. They were more keen on the festivals, or they weren't. You know, it all rumbles on, doesn't it, for years and years, really. But I have heard of bread and circuses. I just can't remember what it is.
She'll come back to us with that.
She will come back to us, because I would like to hear. Yeah, so the Victorians did sanitise May Day, and we have become more and more prudish over time. I think we've always got the sense that we're like a bit wild, and, you know, people before us are all prudes and we're kind of the wild ones. But actually, we're the most locked down of anyone, I think. When you look back through history, we're awful. We're so prim and proper, really, and we don't approve of any of the things that happen. And certainly after the Reformation, particularly, most of the festivals of the year, which really are to do with drinking a lot and merrymaking and carousing and vaguely. I read earlier about vainglorious roisterers. This was to do with May Day, that there were traditions that encouraged vainglorious roistering, and they they had to get rid of it, which is a fabulous phrase.
Roistering.
Or roistering, which is a bit like shenanigans, only more drunken shenanigans, roisterers.
I think that's a very good term. Both Tudor bus mum, my daughter is as well. Laura says, when the ruling powers appeased the underclass with festivities rather than welfare and equality.
Oh yes, all that. Yes,
that's
exactly.
what bread and circuses are.
Yes,
that makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
Well, yes, because a lot of these festivals that came out of even after the Reformation really are all about, for one thing, they're about the people who work all the time. You know, the people who are working on the fields and working in the Industrial Revolution, everything. Them having a day off and getting very drunk and being able to forget it all, basically, and celebrate being alive. And so often there are all sorts of things about the church saying, no, you can't do that, and trying to ban it, basically, is what it always happens. But also attached to that is the idea of charity, and charity is not justice. Like, we've got such a thing about charity now. Oh, aren't we a generous country? We give so much to other people. But really, that's because we're benefiting. Our privilege means that we've got more than other people, so we give money. But that is not justice. Charity is not justice. And we use charity in place of justice, basically, because we want to keep our privilege as a society. And all these festivals remind us always that justice is not really happening. And, you know, there's all the wassailing in the winter,
Yes.
where we go from house to house, and the poor would provide entertainment, and then be given food and drink and sometimes money. It's a way of keeping dignity in a way, isn't it? Because if you're
Yeah.
entertaining, you're not just being given
You're
things.
not begging, are you? You're
No,
providing
you
and
feel
being
like
paid
you're
for
being
that.
given something in return. And so these things are about compassion and about sharing with the poor, and reminding ourselves that the hierarchy of our society really is an agreed thing, because
Yes.
we could turn the world upside down. This is what the Lord of Misrule is in the winter, is
Yes.
about. Suddenly there's a pea or a bean in the cake that people eat, and whoever gets the pea or the bean becomes the king and queen for the day. And that could be a peasant or somebody rich, and it turns the world upside down and
And even
reminds us all the time that this is a human thing. It's not a real thing, this hierarchy that we have.
it's like the wheel card, isn't it? The Wheel of Fortune card in the tarot.
Yes, where it
That
can
you
all,
could be, we can all be up and down. And
yes,
I know there was, I don't know which king it was, but he had, it might have been Henry VIII again.
it's
But you
always Henry VIII.
yeah, he was a bit of a Lord of Misrule himself, wasn't he?
He
But
was.
they, you know, the king, even the king himself, would abide by this Lord of Misrule, you know, and
Yes,
which seems astonishing, doesn't it? You know, because
it
they
is
have like
astonishing.
absolute power, you know, of life or death over people. You know, you'd be a pretty brave Lord of Misrule to get him to get on his hands and knees and bark like a dog, wouldn't you?
You certainly would.
Which I think is what someone got him to do. I'm sure someone got him to act like an animal.
Oh, I didn't know that. Hurrah.
Hurrah!
But again, acting like an animal, again, is a reminder that these kind of facades we all live under are false things, because we are, you know, acting like an animal. Often in African tribes, they have a lot of rituals around becoming other, becoming an animal,
Well, yeah,
dressing as an animal, reminding ourselves that this world that we see, that we think is so fixed, really, that our hierarchy in our society is so fixed, it just isn't. You know,
no,
it's just what's happened, really. And most of it has happened because rich people want to stay rich and poor people stay poor. You know, this is how it works. But this time of year was such an important time of year. Traditionally, Lady Day, which is on the 25th of March,
yeah,
was once New Year, and it was the
okay,
time of year. So spring is a really important time. And what we find with the festivals, and I'm talking really about post-Christian festivals. So these are
right,
coming out of the church and out of Christianity, much as the church is constantly trying to stop them by saying everyone's getting
still
too
happening.
drunk and they need to stop doing it. You know, that these festivals around spring are really important because of the land, and the land is the land, isn't it? Whatever religion it
Yeah,
is, as I say. And what you find is that the spring rituals and festivals echo all the rest of the year. So last night, for instance, today is St. Mark's feast day. And the
right,
important part of that is St. Mark's Eve. So as many of us will know, in Celtic times, whatever Celtic means, but in previous times, the day began the night before. So it would go from dusk to dusk rather than
right,
from midnight. So we're talking about sacred time going from dusk to
yes,
dusk, rather
yeah,
than clock time, which starts at midnight. Midnight is
yeah,
a very arbitrary thing,
yeah,
isn't it? Because how do we know when it's midnight, when it's dark? You
yeah.
know, dusk
Well,
to
you
dusk
wouldn't.
is a more sensible thing, or starting in the morning when it gets light.
Yeah.
When does it get light? You know, is it sunrise or dawn, or,
Is
you
it
know, all
seven
these
or
things are
five?
so,
Yeah,
it's very
yeah,
vague, isn't it? So St. Mark's Eve was last night, and St. Mark's Eve was sometimes seen as a small Halloween. It was the spring Halloween, St. Mark's Eve.
okay,
And what people would do, and this echoes a lot of the festivals at this time of year, which are to do with walking the land and marking again the land that we kind of don't see so much of during the winter. So at this time of the year, we're coming out of that, and we're beginning to have a lot of rituals that are about walking around places that are important to us, or walking around the whole of the boundary of our parish and things like that, which I'll talk about shortly. But St. Mark's Eve, one of the big traditions on St. Mark's Eve is about, if you go and sit in the church porch, and it's very interesting, it's the church porch, because people were excommunicated for doing this in the 1600s. There's evidence of a woman in 1632 going and doing this and being chucked out of the church altogether. And yet it had to be the church porch, because I suppose to people it was the centre of the sacred for them in a lot of ways by that point, because the land had been taken away by the enclosures. So they couldn't really go to a lot of places they once would have gone to. So what you should do on St. Mark's Eve, which was last night, so we don't need to worry about this now, in case anyone gets scared by this tradition, you sit in the church porch between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. and you wait, you fast from sunset, you sit in the church porch, and what you should see is the shades or the ghosts of people who will die in the year to come. So it's ghosts of people who are still alive, and you'll see them walking into the church, and whatever the time they appear in those 2 hours, so the earlier they appear, the sooner they're going to die. So if they appear at 11 p.m, they're going to die quite soon. If it's not till 1 a.m, then they might make it till Christmas, you know, but it's so this is like a big thing.
And
I know, isn't it scary? One of the ceremonies to do with this is about walking round the church before you sit in the porch. This is what I say about these ceremonies at this time of year, being about reiterating our relationship with our sacred spaces and with our landscapes. And another thing on St. Mark's Eve is that you light a bonfire, as you so often do with all these festivals, and that the maidens who wanted to know who they would marry would hold up their smock. Some people said, is it like Sheila Nagig or Balbo, you know, holding up her dress? It's to do with seeing who your husband might be. And I imagine lifting your smock up would be quite a good way of getting a husband. But nevertheless, I mean, it is nearly May Day, isn't it?
I was going to say, especially if they had no undies.
Well, who knows?
Weren't a thing, were they?
Who knows? When they say things in old literature about lifting up the smock, who knows what they actually mean? Do you know what I mean?
I thought it was just holding up a spare smock, but they wouldn't have had a spare smock, would they?
No, I imagine it was the one they had on. But I'm not saying there was anything filthy in it. But, you know. Anyway, you should go to the St. Mark's Eve fire, lift up your smock and look through it, and the face of your future husband would appear on the fabric.
Ooh.
And another thing would be, if you were in your house, to make a cake made of, what was it? An egg cup full of salt, some wheat and some barley, make a cake and then put it on the table to cool overnight and leave your door wide open. And then your future love would come in during the night and turn the cake round, which is quite, most people, when I mentioned this yesterday to some people, they said they'd rather just eat the cake, but that's not the point. It's still a tradition.
You'd be a bit freaked out, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Oh, Katie and Angela have joined us. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Hello, Angie. Hello, Katie.
Yeah, that would be a bit freaky, but that's because there's other ones where you peel an apple or you throw it and see what.
Throw it and see the initials, don't you? There's a lot of that sort of thing, isn't there? Things about your future husband. And these are the concerns people had, like who was going to die and who would they marry wasn't it really, a lot of the time?
And you know, nothing's changed. Like you said about it being the intrinsic, you know, thing, the need in people. It is, you know, are my loved ones going to, you know, be okay? Who's going to die? Are we going to get fed? And am I going to meet the love of my life? At the end of the day, survival, birth, death, survival, that's it. Birth, marriages, death. There isn't. And food, obviously lots of food, but
loads of food.
Yeah, but that is what you need, isn't it? They are the basic needs and concerns of humans wherever. Doesn't matter what part of the world.
Yeah, and we should glory in this, really, because these are the things that should bring us together, whatever religion we are. Really, with these things are what matter to us. And that's it, isn't it? So there's always common ground in whatever religion it is. So despite the history of what the bigwigs in those religions may or may not have done, it's like these things around food and dying and marrying and having children and, you know, connection to the land really are the things that matter to everyone, aren't they? In whatever
Definitely.
culture, whatever religion. You
Yeah.
know, I celebrate that. And as
Yeah.
I said before, when I came here, I think the reason that I started going back to the church was because I love the land, and I try to connect to the land really deeply wherever I am.
Yeah.
And I'm right near where near Canterbury, and where also the old way, which comes across the cliffs at Dover and also across
Mm.
the cliffs of Folkestone, is where Christianity really came into
Yeah.
Britain. So this is one of the oldest places of Christianity in the country. And it's like, I feel like I'm just listening to the land and seeing what the land tells me. So I'm not attached to being a particular religion or staying
No.
anything. Because if I
It,
went somewhere else, I might become something else. But the
you
land is what matters.
and it's you know, whatever faith it is that attachment and that spirituality, isn't it?
Yes.
It's the, you know, like when you do the prayers, you do them in various, you know, various religions and beliefs. You say, you know, Homatakiasin and Inshallah and all
Amen.
different.
Blessed be,
Yeah,
inshallah, for
yeah,
all our relations.
yeah, and that's lovely because it's just like, it's okay, just rounding everybody up and saying, be spiritual, have a faith. It's not you must be this and you must be that, but the attachment to the land. And I'm right as well. I think I'm right in saying that most churches were built on meeting places as well, where people had met and gathered. So the land underneath that church has been, not always, but the land underneath that church has been a meeting place for people to come together and share their fears, their love, their hopes, their grief, their sorrow, and their happiness for time immemorial. So
Yes.
that adds to that. That's got to change the energy of that land, hasn't it? It can't pass it by.
No. I mean,
It,
there must still be a feeling because the people are doing the same thing, whatever the
yeah,
building.
yeah, it's the same thing. It doesn't matter who's leading that congregation or that tribe or that little cult. It doesn't matter who it is. That those thoughts are still there, aren't they?
It's all threaded through everything,
Yeah.
isn't it?
I know.
So,
Is it Berwick in near where the, oh gosh, what's it called? Charleston Farm, where Virginia Woolf and Vanessa Bell lived in.
oh,
Have you never been there? Have you been there?
no.
Oh, you'd love it. All the Bloomsbury set. They lived at Charleston House, Charleston Farm. And near there is a church called Berwick, and they've literally, if it was nailed down, they painted tables,
Oh, how
walls.
great.
You would absolutely love it. It's expensive, but it's worth the trip.
That's
But
a very pre-Reformation thing, isn't it? Churches used to be
yes,
painted with
yeah.
pictures once.
Well, and in the 20s, I want to say 20s or 30s, they they allowed Vanessa Bell, Duncan Grant, Virginia Woolf was something to do with it as well. I think Vanessa Bell's her sister.
Yes.
Yeah, and they allowed Vanessa Bell to paint the church, and there are wood panels in there with flowers and trees and all sorts. But and it's absolutely beautiful. Have a look up
Oh, I
Berwick,
will.
Berwick. But in the graveyard, loud and proud, you look out the window and you see it is an ancient burial mound. So it just
Wow.
goes to show that that's the old and the new combining and being an evolution of all of our thoughts, fears, and our love. And I just think that's such a perfect example. And like you say, it being painted back. And there's a church near us called Capel, and some of my relatives are there, and they've got, when I was a little girl, I used to call them murals, but they've
The
got
murals.
look at this lovely mural, mummy. She's like, wow. And they've got beautiful paintings on the walls. A lot of them are faded now, and you can tell they're 13th century because they are stylized. But they, like you say about painting things and putting your mark on it, it's no different to cave paintings, is it?
No.
No,
And it
and
was a
it's
way
as
of people
beautiful.
understanding stories.
Yeah,
People who couldn't
exactly.
read or didn't have the money to buy books,
Yeah,
they could understand the story that they were going through at that time of year through looking at the
yeah,
paintings, couldn't they? And it is the
yeah,
same as cave paintings,
yeah.
really.
It is,
It's
because that
just
shows.
an artistic need in people, isn't it? A creative
Yeah,
drive.
because I was talking to a lady called River Jones the other week about memorial rituals on Time to Talk, and afterwards I was thinking about cave paintings, and I was thinking, because obviously, although we had speech and language, we had an oral tradition. We didn't write things down, compared to, and that obviously that's lost. And I was thinking, we haven't particularly got that many cave paintings here. We've got some, but I was thinking, were they people's life stories? It's, they didn't just go, I'm going to paint a mammoth here. Perhaps they were depicting, it's a memorial maybe of the bones that they've left in there, because we had this massive fight with this I don't know, that's slightly random and off piece, but
it's interesting though, isn't it?
yeah.
I remember reading about some stones, I think it was in Russia, some megaliths or something, and some experts went there and were trying to work out what astronomical thing it was aligned with, and they couldn't find anything, and the people kept saying, no, it's our relatives. And they said, no, it's astronomical. It always is. And they said, no. And it was grave marker. It wasn't graves, but they were stones put up to remember people. They were memorials.
Okay,
So,
in Russia.
and the experts wouldn't listen to them. I'm sure I've written it down somewhere in one of my blogs. I can't remember, but I'll have to go and look it up.
Yeah, I'd like to read that, Jacqueline.
It's interesting, isn't it? How we, a lot of things aren't what the experts tell us they are these days, are they?
And I've got visions of the people that made Stonehenge looking down on us, or looking up at us, whatever, going, what's wrong with them? It's a such and such. How can you not know?
What are you talking about? That's right. It is funny.
We completely did it, because we're looking at it through our perspective. So we're looking at faith through our perspective, and all of us, pretty much all of us, even those of us that are perhaps diehard pagans now, would have been brought up with Christianity, because we're neo-pagans. Those of us that are pagan, none of us know what happened 1700 years ago.
No, a lot of it's extrapolating, isn't it, from what happens now in Christianity, and thinking, well, then further back that will have been such and such. But sometimes it's literally just come through Christianity. We don't know, do we? No. That's the thing. So we're trying to find something that means something to us, that helps us feel alive, and helps this world be a world we can bear to live in, because of all the things that are going on, all the
horrible things and all the things we have to get through. And that comes back to the rituals of the land as well, doesn't it? And all of that, because they're all designed to help us to cope when things don't go right, and have an answer when there is a famine, when there is a crop blight, of what we could do to correct it.
Yeah, and even Earth Day the other day, which is only 51 years old, it was the 51st anniversary. On Earth Day, I made altars two altars with dried lavender and bird seed and all sorts of things on tree stumps. And I did that deliberately, because I hate seeing tree stumps, because I know there was a tree there. And I'm sure all of us feel like that it's just such a sad thing. So I like to go and decorate the tree stumps.
That's lovely. And I saw some of your pictures.
Yeah, it's a lovely thing to do. But I had a real sense. Last year, I only made one. And this year I made two. And I also wrote a message on a big wall with my chalk in the middle of those. But I had a real sense, not just of making the altars, but of walking the place I live in, and somehow walking it with a sense of the beauty of this place and of the history of this place. And it felt like a bit like, if I've got time, I'm going to tell you about Rogation Tide in a moment, which is relevant today, which is about walking the land. And this is what I say. So St. Mark's Eve was about walking around the church.
Yeah.
And there are so many things at this time of year. On Easter Monday, often there was a thing called clipping the church, which was about standing round the church and holding hands as a way to mark the boundary again. And also Palm Sunday, during the Easter festivities, there would be a procession. My friend Imogen pointed it out to me yesterday. Traditionally, there's another procession that walks round the church. But it's not all about the church. I don't want to make it seem like it's all about the church. A lot of it isn't, but it's about marking. Isn't it? Yeah, it's about marking your sacred space, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So even Earth Day, that's quite new, there's a real, if you walk around different places with an awareness as you walk, you can really feel like you're plugging into something very old. That was what I felt like the other day, really. Yeah. And this all comes out of spring, like Lady Day, as I say, was the beginning of the year. And Lady Day, because the calendar changed by 11 days, would now have been the 5th of April. And the 5th of April is the beginning of the year, isn't it? The tax year is the 5th of April now because of Lady Day, which was the 25th of March. So we haven't even lost these things. Even our, like, so awful, oh, I've got to get my tax returns done. Oh, no, it's awful. It's awful. It's still the beginning. It's still
so
to do with an old festival of the land.
I
It's
didn't
amazing.
know why the tax year started, because the tax year starts on my birthday, April the 6th.
Oh, does it? Yes, it does. That's right.
Yeah. So, and I was born in the year of decimalisation as well. So I'm just like,
oh, were you? Yes.
And I'm rubbish with money. So it was no portentous sign for me.
No, you're more of a Lady Day person, you see.
Yeah, I think so. I was due. I was due earlier. I came late.
Oh, that's what it is. You were waiting for the changing calendars.
I was waiting for something.
You were marking it.
Like you say with the, doing something for Earth Day, I thought, right, what can I do? Shall I go and do this? Can I go and do that? And in the end, what I did was go and just very simply, and obviously I haven't, I've been a bit tired this week, or last week, but what I did was I went and got a bag and put my gloves on and picked up a bag of rubbish on my area.
Oh, that's a great thing to do, isn't it?
And I thought, just the little patch where we live, there's 11 houses here and there's a little car park in front. And I went and picked up the rubbish and I thought, that's my very small, but still it's looking after. But I was thinking about it. She said, I walked not my sacred area of land, but rather than rushing off to, I don't know, the Cauldron Stones or Kit's Cotty and doing something fantastic. And, it was more important to make sure that where I lived was clean and we weren't, thank you, Angie, that it was more sacred to do that. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, because we find it very hard to be where we are, don't we?
Yes,
I remember when I used to go to a lot of pagan meetings and things like that, and this was in London, people would be talking about, oh, I've got to get away, I've got to go to the countryside so I can connect to the land, and I've got to, it's always about being somewhere else that we feel is untouched. There is no untouched place. No. That's the thing. Even in the wild that we see on television programs, it's not as wild as they make it look. Often there are very few untouched places, and our urge to always be somewhere else is not really helping the place we're in, is it? So I think being grounded in the place we're in and picking up litter or do it, that is a sacred thing, isn't it? Because we're saying this place matters.
Yeah, it matters as much as all the, what they called, the tombs and the long barrows and all the rest of it, because this is where I live, and it's all very well going to all these, doing all these fancy things and going to like a cathedral, but when your local chapel needs you to go and weed and tidy up the graves, that's more important to me.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I don't want to be too Christian about it, but our church has four churches, and we have communion, which to me is like, remember when we give us today our daily bread. I remember all the people who haven't got bread in the world, and that Spirit wants to feed us. The earth is endlessly giving us things for free. And that's what I think about when I take communion. But we don't have communion at all the churches every week. And often all the people from our church will run off to one of the other churches where they can have communion. And it always feels like such a sad thing that people aren't coming to the place that they're grounded in. And I'm sure that's a really old feeling of like, why has everyone gone somewhere else? Why doesn't this place matters? It's like there's no the sense of community in ritual is lost, isn't it? And it's interesting that a lot of our festivals that we've carried on or that are important now are things like Mother's Day and Father's Day and Valentine's Day and all those things. They're all personal, about relationship, about small relationships. They're not about community or about joining with other people on the land in the way that once our festivals would have been.
It's not a shared experience, is it?
No. Or about being outside. Being outside is rare these days. A lot of people don't really walk, do they? When I walk, I hardly see anybody walking unless they've got dogs. People don't walk just to walk or to be close to the land. And it's sad, isn't it? It's a sad thing.
I think so, yeah.
why I wanted to talk about this today is because today is a major rogation day, which
Oh,
is interesting. And you posted earlier about Robigalia, didn't you?
Robigalia, yeah,
And
that's Roman.
Rogation Day is said to have maybe come out of Robigalia,
Uh-huh.
but also there was a thing called Ambivalia, I think.
Ooh,
Um,
Abivalia.
I think it's Ambivalia, which was about blessing the crops. And rogation comes from the Latin word rogare. I can't speak Latin, so I don't know how to say it. Rogare or rogare, and
Okay.
that means to ask. And my
Oh,
friend
okay.
Maria, who's listening now,
Yeah.
pointed out to me yesterday that there's a word in Spanish, rogar. I don't know how to say it, Maria, I apologize. But that means to praise or again to ask, I think. So we haven't got that word in our language because our language is German, and
Yeah.
we've pinched things off India when we went there to colonize them and things, as somebody reminded me yesterday, and German and French and all sorts of languages. So we've lost that word in our language. But rogation comes from the Latin to ask. Now, what you read now, because a lot of the Christian festivals have been divided from the land,
Uh-huh.
which is a deliberate thing, because that's hierarchy again, trying to weaken people, to my mind, because if you're
Yeah.
not connected to the land, you're just wobbled out. All you have is, how can I get my money so I can buy my food in the supermarket? How can I, how will I survive unless somebody more important in authority than me tells me what to do and gives me my food and gives me this little bit of money so that I can feel? This is what the middle classes are about. The middle classes don't think about land because they don't need to grow their own food. They just need to go to Tesco's, don't they? It's a damaging thing. The middle classes, to me, were invented by higher up people in order to divide people from the earth. And now we all look down on the lower classes and the working classes. It's interesting being in this country with such a class hierarchy still,
And we
because you
think
can
there isn't
really,
one, but there is.
there is, and you can really see the echoes of us being divided from the land through the enclosures when you look at our class
Yeah,
system.
you
And
can.
so not needing to grow our own food, we feel, makes us in a state of not being able to ensure our own survival, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because we can't grow anything. We haven't got any land.
Well,
Most of us have only got a pot on a balcony, haven't we? Or if
yeah.
we've got that.
I had exactly the same conversation with my mum yesterday. We went to beautiful Scotney Castle yesterday. Maria's saying Rogar, you said it right, bravo.
Thank you.
Angie's saying that's how I feel about where I live, but need to change my perspective of that. I think that's to do with me and the picking the. And Maria said it's important to keep this sense of community in rituals alive. It nurtures our souls, and it does, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And we were saying yesterday about, obviously with Brexit and everything else, and the subsidies that farmers got, not to provide this food so that we could buy it from Europe.
Yes.
So now people, they don't have the land, they don't have the skills, but we are going to have to start growing our own stuff again, and people are going to have to pay the prices that it comes in at, or we're going to have to import it really cheaply from some third world. So we're then shunting that elsewhere. But what we need to do is reclaim that land, but there won't. How much land will there be left?
Well, that's right.
We're
And
talking about houses and no
lockdown did
land,
this
no
as well,
life
didn't it?
cost. Yeah,
Yeah, lockdown, when there was no vegetables in the shops, it really made people, and that panic, I think, comes out of our disconnection.
yeah,
We panic because if there's nothing in the shops, we'll die. This is what we feel. Even if we've got a garden that we can make a vegetable patch, many of us don't know how to grow vegetables. Even if we've got land, there's a wonderful what would I call it? A wonderful group called 3 Acres and a Cow. I don't know if people have heard of them.
I've heard of them. Yeah,
They're wonderful, and they do a lot of theatre and songs. They sing old folk songs and act out the process of the enclosures and our disconnection from the land. And it's called 3 Acres and a Cow because there was once a movement for everyone in this country to be given 3 acres of land and a cow, because it was believed that if you had that, you could ensure your own survival. And of
yeah,
course, the enclosures took that all away from everyone. And 3 Acres and a Cow was a movement to try and give it back again, because there were too many people in poverty and too many people starving and, all those things. It's the removal of the land from the people is something that goes through so much of our religion. And so much of our society still, this is a massive wound in this country, you know, and in a lot of countries. And then we've gone off and taken land away from other people.
Yep.
I absolutely know. But
Yep.
if we remembered what the land meant, maybe we'd all be a bit less likely to keep invading other people's countries.
Oh, definitely.
But, you know, it's this removal from the land that makes us so weak. And so there's a wonderful rhyme, which is from the 16th century. I've got to remember it now. They hang the man, lock up the woman that steals the goose from off the common, but leave the greater villain loose that steals the commons from the goose.
Yeah.
So that's about the rich getting away with it, while people who are in poverty having to steal a cabbage, you know, and then being sent to Australia and things like that, you know, are punished hugely for doing something they're forced to do through poverty. A bit like us now getting cash in hand on benefits and not saying we've got it, because you can't live on benefits. It's exactly the same thing as people stealing a cabbage hundreds of years ago because their children were starving and being
what are you
sent
going to
off.
do? You've got to feed people.
Yeah, that you're sort of forced to break the law, which makes you vulnerable because you always feel like you might get caught. And then you're always on the defensive, aren't you? Rather than saying, no, why is this like this? Why haven't we got land? Why haven't we got justice? Why is charity more important than justice? I'm getting a bit off the subject. I get very passionate about this.
That's cool. No, it's relevant. It's pertinent to what you're talking about. So it's perfect.
So today I'm going to try and squash this in because this is what I was going to talk about. And now I see there's only 9 minutes left. I'm brambling.
Rambling. Of course you'd be rambling.
So today is Robigalia, as you pointed out, which turns into rogation here, which means to ask. And the church say now that is people praying against calamities, like general calamities. But once it was about praying, asking for the crops to grow. So it was about blessing the crops. And out of that came beating the bounds. And beating the bounds is the thing of walking round your parish boundaries and praying and singing the psalms, which presumably people would have done even, I mean, there weren't parish boundaries at one point, but now we've got parishes, going to different places in a procession and making blessings at those places for your boundaries and for your land and praying over the crops. And this is about this time of year, going back to the land that we wouldn't have gone to so much in the winter and remarking the places that are important to us and marking our boundaries. And there's quite a lot of stuff in the historical record about people causing hoo-ha at the boundaries with the people on the other side, because of course a boundary for us, like in this parish, is also the boundary of the parish next to us. So they'd all be fighting over whose boundary it was and causing all sorts of shenanigans at the boundaries. You know, this is where football comes from, isn't it? Like, this is my football team. You know, it's roistering again, isn't it?
It's
and kind of but marking the land really and praying for the crops to grow is so important this time of year. And then we go into harvest and Lammas at the other side of the year, you know, and we've kind of lost this sense of spring really, of needing to ask for the crops to grow, because of course we don't have crops, we just go to the supermarket and buy them, don't we? So but this sort of reconnection with the land by marking it, by walking it, by actually being present to the land is so important.
Yeah. And my walk through the woods, there is a pub the other end of it, but that's not the only reason I walk it. But every year I walk through there, which is probably an unconscious similar thing. But every year I walk through there to see what they've planted. And when they pulled up the orchards, I was really sad that they pulled the orchards up. And the farmer said he pulled the orchards up because it wasn't sort of financially viable for him to do that anymore. But they planted beans and various things. So if you get a broad bean, it's probably from the fields by me, because there's so many broad beans. But they've grown maize, and you know, and I go every year to see what's there so that I can watch it grow. And there is an immense sadness when it's gone, that I think, oh, what is it? And of course, they're not clearing it for houses. There's always that, you know, kind of.
Always, isn't there? Always there's that feeling.
But there's this, when you start to see things come through, it's almost a maternal thing of like, oh, what's coming through, and then identifying what it is. And there's an excitement, and it does sound like I need to get out more, but at the same time, I think
That's great.
Yeah, we're on the same wavelength, so that's cool. But there's an excitement of like, what's it going to be this year, and watching it grow and flourish. And times when it's been left to go to rack and ruin, a sadness that, why are they not picking this? This is food. I mean, like, we can't all live on broad beans, for example, but there's a year they just didn't pick them. And
Strange.
And I'm thinking, it's kind of, we could have done something. We could have, it'd be the year everybody lived on pasta last year. Do you know what I mean? Pasta and rice, and everybody stockpiled it. But I'm sure there's plenty of fab things you could do with broad beans, but watching it wither away without being used is so decadent and sad.
Yes, because if they're going to grow something and not pick it, why not just let it go back to nature?
Yeah, let it have a fallow year.
Let it have a fallow year.
Yeah.
We've lost the sense. Once people used to have, what was it called? The open field system, where people just used to have a little strip of land.
Yeah.
And they would each farm it, and that would create a sort of cycle of different crops.
Yeah.
Just naturally, because people were doing their own thing. And then when they enclose them into bigger pieces of land, then out of that eventually comes monoculture, doesn't it? Which is so damaging, taking out the hedgerows. And the hedgerows were put in the first place, in a lot of cases, although some of them are Bronze Age, a lot of them were put in to keep people off the land, for the enclosures. So even hedgerows are they're a double-edged thing, really, hedgerows. But the thing is, now that hedgerows are part of the wild and are so important to nature and to our hearts, seeing a wild hedgerow that's really beautifully growing and looked after just makes you feel like, something is still here. Do you know what I mean? Something. And yet then monoculture's even taking that out, isn't it? Now they're taking
huge fields.
So the land used to be open, and people used to farm bits of it. Then they wanted to put fences around it all and wouldn't let us on, which is where rogation tide went out of consciousness, really, because people couldn't go around the boundaries because there were fences in the way,
stopping them. So,
and then now they're taking all the fences out again and making giant monoculture farms that are killing everything because there's only one crop. And they
see them, don't you? And they just go for as far as you can see, and you think, and then it's kind of it's just slaughtering the land in a way, isn't it?
It's killing the topsoil, isn't it? Because it never lets it. And there's evidence that bumblebees would rather forage on a hedgerow. They'd rather forage on the side of the hedgerow next to a motorway than they would on the side next to monoculture crops. This is a bit negative. It isn't meant to be negative, because the thing is, all these things about these festivals are still in us. And we can do really, it feels like small things, like going and making an altar on a tree stump or picking up litter. It feels small, but it is not small.
It's not small, is it?
These are things that come out of our intrinsic humanity and our belonging to the earth and the land. And I know that the land feels it. If we can take these moments, even if you just walk along a pavement one day and see a little flower growing up through the cracks, and you celebrate the fact that life is always trying to find a way in, the land feels us celebrating that, and the land will meet us. Like, the land will show us more and more beauty and more ways that we can heal our relationship with it. And it's so important to somehow find that where we are, rather than feeling like we've always got to be somewhere else. Not that going somewhere else isn't wonderful, it's absolutely wonderful, but just to celebrate those places we're in, and to bring back some of these old ways of thinking about, this is where I belong, and I'm going to learn this place, and I'm going to be in relationship with it, is so healing. And Caroline Hillier, I heard her do a podcast once. I don't know if I mentioned this last time, I can never remember, but she was talking about how we all get overwhelmed. There's so much to do, like the world, the earth. There's so much, climate change, everything. It's so huge. How can we do any of it? We can't heal everything. We're only one little person, or even if we're in a group, we're small little groups, we can only do small things. But what she said was, if we can look at the place we're in, just look at the land you're on, like even just your house, even if you've not got a garden, grow a plant. Or if you've got a garden, let some wild things grow. Or
Yeah.
if you've only got outside, go and look for things growing up through the cracks and learn what they are. You know, all these things. She said, if we could just make the place we're in sacred, one day we might look up and find there are all sorts of people making their place sacred, and they might all join together. It's
Yeah.
not about the huge, what the damaging thing for us is we've become people who look at the hugeness of everything,
Yeah.
and we forget to look at what's right under our feet. And if we could do that, we could actually make everything so much better. You know, that's what we need to do. When I phoned the council about why do you keep mowing the verges, they said, but we're growing wildflowers 8 miles away for the bees. Like their
That's a
vision is
long
too
flight
big.
for the bees.
I know, I said that. I said, bees don't fly that far. And what about the bees that are already
Yeah.
8 miles away? They can't all go there, can they?
No.
You know, why don't you just let the dandelions grow? But that's a symptom of looking far away, isn't it, all the time, rather than thinking, what can I do here in this? Like, what can I do around my feet? There's an old saying that spring comes when you can put your foot in a circle of 7 daisies. And I think that's a real reminder that life is actually really small. Like we don't need to think about hugeness of everything all the time. We can just look down and think, oh, there's 7 daisies, it's spring. You know, that's such a beautiful symbol of our relationship, isn't it, with the earth? So I always try to remember that every year. I think, oh, now there's 7 daisies, it's spring.
I'm going to go and look in the garden, because it doesn't quite need cutting yet, but we do tend to leave it longish.
Yes.
You know, but yeah, I know there's dandelions and daisies on the back lawn, and I love seeing them.
They're lovely, aren't they?
Like I think Emma said earlier on about a number of people that have, you know, plastic lawns, and I'm like, we haven't got a huge garden, but why would I want a plastic one?
I know my the lady I work for's got a plastic lawn, but she's got Parkinson's, and I understand she can't. But the thing is, what's great about plastic lawns is plants still grow up through them. I didn't realise that. She's got red dead nettles all over her lawn. And I say, oh, I love that plant. And I go on about it, and she leaves them now, which is great. But they come up through the plastic lawn. Even a plastic lawn can't stop life. I mean, I hate plastic lawns, but the plants will always come up. There's no stopping them. It's impossible. So
that's amazing. And we've got a little bit out the front. There's a strip of land between us and the bungalows opposite. And there's a little bit, and there's an apple tree that died, and the council didn't replace it, so we chopped it down because it was absolutely had it. We chopped it, and we ceremonially burnt it with our neighbours.
Oh, beautiful!
And we didn't burn it with our neighbours. We burnt it, and us and our neighbours planted another apple tree and a cherry tree.
Oh, lovely is that?
But everyone they're only little ones, but they've really, really grown, and the buds are coming through. And it's for anybody that lives in our little block of 11 houses to when they're, obviously it's going to be some time before there's any fruit on them, but we said to them as well, every time they come to mow the lawn, I go, oh, can you leave that? We're growing a wild bit there. And every now and then they get told to mow it, but I do try and say to them, can you leave that? We're trying to have wild seeds and that there. But just very quickly, my friend Tony, we were talking about what we were doing for Earth Day, and he said, oh, I'm going to do some more guerrilla gardening. And I was like, what do you do? And he walks quite a lot, and he always walks to a churchyard, and he throws plant seeds on the really old graves that nobody tends anymore, the ones that are broken down, and he puts some pictures up, and all these little pretty meadow flowers come through, and the churches have left them, and there's all this beauty. And I think what a beautiful place a beautiful place to do it, where it's sacred and sort of the ancestors. And interesting you said the ancestors, because I've got an article that I'm going to publish in Maidstone Pagans, not my article, next week, and that's about Beltane being the opposite of Samhain. And obviously in the southern hemisphere it is Samhain, isn't it, coming up, not Beltane. And about them making an altar and setting a table for their ancestors at Beltane, although they're here in the northern hemisphere. And I think the ancestors, that's a connection, isn't it? Whatever faith, that's a connection as well, isn't it?
Yes, always. Definitely.
Wow. Okay, was there anything else? There was something else you were going to say.
Was there? What was it?
I don't know. We were talking about. Oh no, it's what I was going to say because I think was it Katie shared the thing about the cuckoo. Was it
yes.
the cuckoo? And I 5:30 this morning. I wandered to the little girl's room and I heard a cuckoo.
I've never heard a cuckoo here. That's very exciting. No.
I thought I heard one yesterday, but I listened again and it was a wood pigeon. But 5:30 this morning, I was like, no, that's definitely the cuckoo.
Well, that is amazing because today is Cuckoo Day in the medieval calendar, and it used to be the 14th of April. So they used to say the cuckoo would sing between St. Tiburtius's Day on the 14th of April, even though that day is actually in August. So that's like another weirdness. But between St. Tiburtius Day on the 14th of April and St. John's Day on the 24th of June is when the cuckoo would sing. And of course, with the 11-day calendar change, the 25th of April is Cuckoo Day. So you heard a cuckoo on Cuckoo Day, which is so perfect.
It was super because there's the old rhyme my nan taught me was the cuckoo comes in April, he sings his song in May, June he bids us all farewell, and July flies away.
Yeah.
But you saying about the sacred, I thought I'm going to record this, and I thought I don't want the houses in it, and I thought no, I live amongst houses.
Yes, but if a cuckoo's around the houses, that's a great thing, isn't it?
Yeah, so I've recorded, so I will share that later. So
I'd love to hear that.
And the cockerel at 5:30. Someone's got a cockerel round here.
Oh, fabulous.
That's how I know it's 5:30 because you hear cockatoo. 5:30 and all is well in the world.
Oh, I know that because my cat wants feeding normally at 5:30 in the morning.
Oh, solid Dennis. How is solid Dennis?
He's very well, thank you very much. He's out on the bench, I expect. Basking in the sun.
Well, thank you very much, Jacqueline. As always, we've run out of time to talk when we could talk for. You'll go, oh, I should have said this and I should have said that. But I'm sure you'll come back in a couple of months' time and talk to us about something else because it's such fun having you here because I never know what I'm going to find out.
No, nor do I. I don't know what I'm going to find out. Who knows what happened?
That's the thing, isn't it? That's okay. So I've got a bloody roost that keeps going off at 3 a.m. I think it's gone mad.
3 a.m. is a bit bonkers, isn't it?
It's a bit crazy, but yeah, there's lots of comments. I know you'll go back and have a look about how much people have learned from you, Jacqueline, and
thank you,
what we know. And if it gets people thinking, that's why I do these because it's fun as well to find.
It is fun. It is. Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll leave you there. Have a wonderful Sunday. What have you got planned, Jacqueline?
I think I'm just going shopping and then doing some tidying, I think, probably. But what I'll actually probably do is go and sit on the bench with solid Dennis and drink tea.
Sensible plan. I'm going to work, so I'm going to the pub.
Oh, have a lovely time. I hope it's nice.
Working at the pub.
I know, but at least the sun's out.
It's beautiful, and there's the most beautiful sunset down the valley. It's a nice pub, and we're lucky. We've got a big green out the front with swings.
Oh, yeah,
not the
lovely.
pub, it's just a village green. So I am lucky that's
yes.
And I might coerce people into doing a bit of tidying there as well. Okay, well, we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.